I am super excited. Here we are at the back of our presentation, but super excited to have everybody here today for our session on roasting this amazing coffee that Marcos can produce from his farm, Fazenda São Sebastião. So this is a roasting exchange, if you will. I had the pleasure, this is a project that we initiated some time ago because we brought the coffees to Milan for the World of Coffee. Flavio was actually at our booth brewing the coffee. I was playing the role of a barista, which I don't get to do very often, brewing Little Waves coffee, which Aurelie so kindly sent. And we wanted to just share a little bit about this coffee and particularly how it was produced at the farm and how it was roasted. So, you know, we've got some great partners in this. We have Marcos from Fazenda São Sebastião in Brazil, who provided this great coffee, which we'll learn a lot more about. We have Aurelie from Little Waves, the US Roaster of the Year. We have Flavio from Stoll Kaffe in Zurich. So we're covering the continents here. We're just missing Asia, unfortunately, and maybe the Middle East. But a storied coffee roasting company that's been around a long time, since I think the 1930s. And Martha from Minamihara, also in Brazil, who her company is not only a great roaster, but also a producer themselves. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes because I want to let our guests introduce themselves and their companies. So Flavio, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Flavio, nice to meet you, everybody. I'm currently the roaster at Stoll Kaffe. So no, I'm not the only one. We are actually two roasters, but I'm the one who is responsible for our single origin coffees. I roast for Stoll Kaffe since 6 months now, so it's not been a long time. And I'm also here the head of education at Stoll Kaffe. So we also teach people how to make coffee. Yeah, we roast here at Stoll Kaffe since 1936, actually. But we started with our single origin line specialty coffee in 2010. We roast with two roasters from Probat, one 12 kilo and one 60 kilo. And I always roast with a smaller one, with a 12 kilo. Yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Yeah, fantastic. And just so to know a little bit more about you, so you've been roasting at Stoll for about 6 months. Is that your first roasting experience? Did you roast elsewhere?
Yes.
How did you get into the role?
Yes, I had some experience in the past. I used to work for other roasteries as well. I also own a small roasting project myself on the side. But yes, for Stoll Kaffe since 6 months, less than a year, yes.
Yeah. Very cool. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. And I love the setup that you and the photos that you shared showing the machines. It looks very flexible, but also very organized. Very cool model.
It is, yes. Yeah, so we are a mid-sized roastery. And with this, I mean, as you can see, so we roast with these two machines, but we roast at the moment around 180 tons per year. So this to give you an idea of which kind of size we are. Yeah. So we are not really a micro roastery.
Yeah, but like
it's not huge.
I often think of it as sort of like a local roasting company versus a more regional roasting company versus kind of an international or national, right? So
yes, I mean, we are pretty strong here in Zurich, I would say. We have some customers outside of Switzerland as well. And now since a couple of years, we are starting to show the people that Stoll Kaffe, it's not only the classic dark roast, but that we also have some single origin specialty coffee, light roasted coffee on offer. Yes.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to hear more as we go through our session
Yeah,
today.
yeah, sure, sure.
And Aurelie, why don't you tell us a little bit about Little Waves? I like, as the owner, you can see that you're also lifting green coffee and right, doing all the jobs.
Yes. Yes, so I'm Aurelie Barrera Gratsky, one of the owners of Little Waves Coffee Roasters in Durham, North Carolina. We won Micro Roaster of the Year, so we are a micro roastery. As you can see, our space is pretty small, but it does the job. The pandemic has really helped our roastery, where we started selling nationwide and even to other countries, but we're still within the micro roastery realm and hoping to continue to grow. My husband and I, Leon, we started our business in 2010 as Cocoa Cinnamon, which is our cafes. We have 3 cafes in Durham, and we started roasting as Little Waves Coffee Roasters in 2017. Yeah, and I've been roasting since 2017. And as you can see in the picture, we roast on a Loring, and we have the 15 kilo.
That's great. And what?
I will say one thing that's really great about like working with our team is that we're predominantly women of color roastery. We're all within 5'2" feet tall. So it's really fun to learn all about leverage and how to move all of the things. And it's fun to be able to, I don't know, it feels empowering to be in there with our amazing team.
I love that. Yeah, as somebody who trained roasters and taught roasting courses for many years, I can't tell you how many times I heard of, students or clients of mine, women that were passed up for roasting jobs because there was some mythology that like, oh, they weren't tall enough, they weren't strong enough. But yeah, with leverage and the right tools, like all of that can be overcome. It's such a bad excuse. So I'm glad that you're proving everybody wrong and pushing us to where the world should be with that. Very cool.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And Martha, share a little bit about, I just pulled some photos off of your amazing social media for Minamihara. So if you can share a little bit about your company and you as a roaster and you personally, I'd love it.
Hello, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. So let's go over it. Actually, I've been working with coffee, I guess, for 7 years now. I didn't start working with coffee because I loved coffee, but because living as an actress in São Paulo wasn't easy at all. So coffee comes just to help paying my bills, and I simply fall in love with it. I started as a barista, and in my first year, I got to be the first runner-up in the Brazilian Barista Championship. And then in 2019, I got to be the champion, and I even got into the final. So, wait for me. You're going to hear more about me. I hope so. I do hope. And I'm here at Minamihara farm for a year and a half now. So I started focusing in roasting coffee since I moved to Minamihara. Now I manage the industry facilities over here that comes from dry mill to customer service. We are opening a coffee shop, opening a school, and opening the tourism part of the farm as well. So we are here from seed to cup, and I manage this part of the industry. If you, Aurelie, if you are a micro roaster, I guess I need to introduce myself as a nano roaster, because we actually we are not a roastery. We are like a quality lab for the farm, but yes, we do offer this roasting service to our partners, to our neighbors. So we roast for our brand, and we roast for some other friends. But we roast such a small part of our coffee because most of all is exported to US, to Asia, and to Europe. And so I think it's a little bit like this. a year and a half roasting and learning a lot. As I told you before, we work with amazing coffees, only natural coffees here in Minamihara farm. We produce 100% organic, shade-grown coffee by avocado trees. And you know, since I'm here, the last punctuation, the last Q grade that I found here is 84 points, and it's natural and it's organic. So for me, it was amazing to have this experience roasting another kind of coffee, a fermented coffee, that even though I'm in Brazil, you know, it's something like I was roasting a completely different origin coffee.
Yeah, really lovely.
You need to stop me, Marcus. Otherwise, you know, I can't help myself.
I was going to say, it's like you gave me the perfect segue to hear from Marcos and a little bit about Fazenda São Sebastião. And Martha, if you don't mind, if we need any help translating, I think you're up for it. So Marcos, you're muted right now, but let's hear a little bit about the farm.
Marcos, o microfone, o som.
I can introduce the São Sebastião farm, talk about my experience. We came out in 2017. Me and my wife, Catalina King, we starting the quality management, the quality control in São Sebastião farm. In 2018, we starting the fermentation process because 5 years ago, about 5 years ago, we are watching the one movie from the Colombia movie. The one guys, they put the coffee inside the bottles. The closed bottles, he put it inside the water, in the rivers. You understand? This is reference for making the cave. My father-in-law listened to this idea. He told me, "Hey, Mark, I have a better idea. I think it is much difficult, but I can make the cave. Because why we make the cave? Why this Colombia guys put the coffee inside the water? I feeling when I student, quando eu pesquisei, né? We feeling that the temperature is very important for fermentation coffee. You know, because when you fermentation coffee outside, we have the many the climate, the temperature. This is not so good, but in cave, the temperature is static. Always the 7 days, the keeping the 18 degrees, 19 degrees, don't move this. This is the cave story.
No, that's amazing. And we'll talk a little bit more about specifically how you processed this lot in the cave. But I mean, I'm just struck by the beauty of your farm and the organization from the patios to the cave to your warehouse with the cupping room that overlooks the patios. We'll see a photo of that later. And so thank you for providing this coffee. I know we asked you to provide some very small lots and to ship them all over the world, and you really delivered, and that I'm just grateful and thankful for that, because of course, without your coffee, none of this would have been possible. And without such an interesting and tasty coffee, this would have been less exciting, I think, for all of us. So thank you. And just by way of introduction, I'm Marcus with Cropster. I run our education and content programs here. I am a roaster as well, so I had the benefit of also roasting this coffee and tasting it in my lab, which was great. And you know, of course, Cropster is hosting this session because everybody that's on this call used Cropster in different ways to manage their production, to manage the inventory, and to track the quality of the coffee as they produced it, be it at the farm or in the roastery. So we'll be looking at some screenshots and things of that as well. But thanks to you all for joining, and for our attendees as we go along and get a little bit more into the meat of the talk today. If you have questions, please just use the Q&A and we will pick them up and answer those as we go. But back to you, Marcos, because I just grabbed a little bit of data out of your Cropster account. So thank you for granting me access to do that, so that we could take a look at the harvest, some of the production factors as you processed the coffee, and of course, the temperature tracking, the bricks, the initial bricks reading, and the humidity measurements as you went through. So I just want to leave the stage to you a little bit to tell us a little bit more about how this coffee came to be.
Marcos, se precisar de ajuda para a tradução, só falar. O áudio a gente não está escutando, Marcos.
Sorry. Thank you, Martha. This is very important. When you put the coffee inside the cave, we always record the many information. For example, the bricks, the humidity, temperature, the weight, the mass temperature. You see the temperature, 27 in the May, the 18 degrees, 28, 18 degrees, 29, 19 degrees. Always the same, the temperature. You see, this is very magic in the inside the cave. Marcus, in the inside cave, we don't have the air conditioner. This temperature is the natural, because upstairs we have the vegetable. This vegetable has the cool temperature for inside the cave. Very interesting. E uma coisa, Marta, que eu queria que você explicasse, a gente, desses 3 anos de fermentações na caverna, a gente percebeu que os cafés que a gente fermenta dentro da caverna, elas tendem a puxar para as frutas amarelas.
Espera aí, vamos lá. So he asked me to tell you guys that in these 3 years that they have been fermenting coffee inside the cave, they notice that the coffees fermented inside the caves go to yellow fruits notes. Marcos.
Why? Porque eles, dentro da caverna, a temperatura da massa, ela chega até de 20 a 22 graus.
Because the temperature of the coffee itself inside the fermentation bowls, it stays to quanto? 26, né?
De 20 a 22 graus.
From 20 to 22 degrees Celsius inside the coffee fermentation.
Okay.
When I fermentation, the outside, the temperature is more high. E quando é assim, ela puxa para as frutas vermelhas. Quando passa dos 25 graus na massa, ela vai para o vinhoso, morango, frutas vermelhas.
And he said that when the temperature goes over 25, 26 degrees Celsius, the flavor profile goes to red fruits like strawberry, for example. And it happens when he was fermenting outside the cave, where the temperature wasn't stable.
No, it's fascinating. I love hearing the understanding of the impact on flavor. I think, for me, when I tasted this coffee, what was amazing is I knew that it was a fermented coffee, but it didn't get into those winey, as you say, red fruit notes. And the aftertaste and the mouthfeel were much cleaner than many of these fermentation trials. And certainly it seems that these controls are playing a big part of that.
I agree 100% with you, Marcos. For me, the best part of this coffee is that the body, the texture were preserved. You know, it wasn't any astringent for me. It was soft and a soft and less longing aftertaste.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
this is
astringency,
very
that sort of
important.
metallic quality. Sorry, Marcos.
O interessante, Marta, de ficar para eles, que depois de 7 dias fermentando numa temperatura estável, né, de 18 graus, quando a gente tira ele do estado de fermentação, a casca dela ainda não está oxidada, ela está ainda cereja.
He was saying that, that there's an interesting fact is that when they take out from the fermentation, the skin of the cherry is still preserved. It's like a cherry. It's not degraded at all.
Fascinating. We've driven deep into the processing here, or at least understanding this cave fermentation. I'd like to just hear some of the basics about the coffee too. Like, what variety did you send us? A little bit about where on the farm it was grown and the terroir. So can you share just a little bit about that as well, Marcos?
Eu acho que é isso, Marta, né? Não sei o que ele quer.
Ele quer saber mais detalhes do café, variedade, como que tu plantou, fora a fermentação, o que tu fez nesse café?
Sim. Essa fermentação, a variedade dele é um arara. Se não me engano, produzido a 1.200 metros, 1.100 de altitude. Ele foi colocado dentro das bomboneiras sem água. Tá? A gente faz uma fermentação sem água. Por quê? A gente fez uns testes. Quando a gente faz com água, ela não fica tão brilhante, tão evidente. E quando a gente fermenta ela sem água, o café ele fica mais explosivo, mais evidente. Todas as notas sensoriais ficam mais acesas, né? Então,
Okay, so that he was saying me that this is a Arara variety, and they started fermented without water. They noticed that when the fermentation is made without water, the flavors get loads more explosive. Pode continuar.
E a gente, o que a gente percebeu esses anos todos, né? A temperatura ambiente para qualquer tipo de fermentação é extremamente importante. Então a maioria das pessoas não sabem disso, né? Mas a gente percebeu que quando você tem uma temperatura ambiente controlada, você tem um controle melhor no processo.
And they figure out that the temperature, to control the temperature, it's probably the most important part of the fermentation process. And he thinks that most of the people knows about it. The temperature outside the fermentation. It needs to be stable. That's what they figure out in these 3 years fermenting coffee inside the cave.
E dentro da caverna, ela tem uma umidade relativa muito alta. Vocês podem ver aqui nos parâmetros, tem dias que está 78, 79, 81. Então, sem querer, a gente conseguiu reproduzir um clima da América Central dentro da caverna.
Ah, that's nice. He's asking you guys to take a look in the humidity percentage in the presentation. They didn't know that it was going to happen, but they control the humidity as well. It's almost the same day by day, and it's very, very high. They didn't know that it was going to happen, but they make like Central America climate inside the cave. So it's like Brazilian Central American coffee.
I love it.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
Marcos. Yeah, thank you for sharing so much of the data about this coffee. I think, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, like, you know, looking at Cropster here, how challenging it could be to keep track of all of this data, either on the fermentation or even just of the harvest of a significant farm. You know, that's really where Cropster comes in, is to help manage that data. So I hope you're enjoying using it as an Origin customer. If you have any comments there, I'd love to hear them.
Marcos, ele está perguntando se tu tem algum comentário sobre como está sendo usar o Cropster Origin. Eu também tenho, depois eu vou falar depois de ti. E ele está muito feliz que tu compartilhou todos esses dados com ele. Ele quer saber se tem alguma coisa para falar do Origin.
Ele é uma ferramenta hoje essencial. Eu não consigo imaginar agora trabalhando sem esse controle. E eu agradeço, porque a Cropster ele foi bem aberto a introduzir novos parâmetros para que a gente pudesse trabalhar.
Everything that he's saying, I need to say that I think exactly the same thing because I work with Cropster Origin as well. And he's saying that he can't think about his life working with coffee without Origin Cropster anymore. And it's an amazing software where we can put all the data of the crop. But the best part is that Cropster was very open to work with the producers, and for me was as well. And they were able and they were open to put exactly all our needings in the software.
Now that's great to hear. I think when you're innovators and trying new things, it's nice to hear that we can be responsive to that. Flavio and Aurelie, do you have any questions for Marcos before we kind of look at the coffee and the roasting side of it?
No, everything's clear for me. Very interesting.
Yeah, very fascinating to hear just how you can manipulate the climate. And I don't know, I think this is like, I think for a while, the fermentation trend, I feel like felt like a trend at first, and now it's starting to make a lot of sense as to like using it as a tool when we're thinking about climate change, and using it as a tool for, I don't know, just these really beautiful expressions of what coffee can be. So thank you, Marcos. Like I had so much fun roasting it, and I had so much fun drinking it. I'm still drinking it right now.
I'm crying now.
Great. Yeah, and I think Aurelie, like to your comment and also to Marcos, you know, he was first inspired by these Colombians that he mentioned, right? And
Yes.
and me too. I think the first time I really experienced this was with a buddy of mine, Hernando Tapisco in Colombia, who was taking, you know, sort of less desirable varieties from the perspective of a lot of specialty roasters, and through fermentation trials and things, seeing, you know, well, what if we can take like an 80 or 82 point coffee and be clever in the processing, not overwhelm the coffee, but increase the cupping scores to a significant point. That's really important for farmers, and I think, like you say, for the viability of coffee long term.
Yeah.
This is fascinating because we possible control starting the origin until roasting. This is fascinating. You know?
Yeah.
After we have the avaliation, né? Dá para você também pontuar, né? Provando os cafés e colocando essas referências. E isso tudo a gente consegue passar para o cliente, né?
He wanted to finish his comment saying that it's amazing to come from the origin, Cropster Origin, and go until the Cropster cup. And he's able to share all these things with his customers. So it makes the selling easier.
Amazing. And yeah, for your customers who are using Cropster and Cropster Cup to share that back, I think. Which one of our attendees actually just typed a comment in the Q&A as well, that I think is a nice place to wrap up the discussion of the coffee. And they say that they work with this coffee on a daily basis. And one interesting fact is that they found the shelf life to be higher with your coffees, Marcos, than other fermented coffees. So some longer term benefits perhaps of this careful and intentional temperature control.
Thank you.
Yeah, so important. Well, as we shift gears to the roastery, I want to make sure that Marcos also has a chance to ask questions of our roasters about how they're handling the coffee. But I wanted to just sort of start at the beginning and ask Flavio, Martha, Aurelie, when that coffee first arrived in your hands, what were your first impressions? And maybe more important for our viewers and attendees is just what are your processes at your company for analyzing and grading coffees as they come in? What are you doing before you set out to roast it as far as physical analysis and things? Martha, why don't you start us off?
Okay. I was very happily surprised because since I work with dry mill and all these sorting machines, the first impression was this was very well dry milled. There was almost no defects, you know, the coffee was very clean and with a good size to roast and very uniform. So I didn't have any trouble, you know, because the first thing that we do when we get a coffee is to sort and classify. And there was almost nothing for me to do because the coffee was almost perfect, you know. So I used the Cropster Origin as well. So we put all the data in the origin, and then I came to my park, you know, where I have fun in my Probat, my Probatino, and I went to roast. So the first impression was it was very well sorted and it is fermented because of the color. And I was just like, let's see what I'm going to have. Since I work only with naturals, almost only with naturals in here, sometimes I'm afraid of exactly these things that you were talking about. Is it going to last long? Is it going to have some problem in the texture? And as I said, I was happily surprised because the beautiful that I see in the bag, I saw in the cup as well. The body and the texture were very, very good.
Nice. Aurelie, how about you at Little Waves? What's your general approach, but specifically with this coffee, what were your impressions?
Yeah, so our general approach is to, look at the green coffee when we sample it, you know, sample roast it, cup it, grade it, score it, use that memory of what we tasted to kind of help us approach a profile for when we buy it, and transfer that information over to the big roaster. My first approach, or my first impression of this coffee was the smell and the aroma. Like when I opened the bag, I was just like, I wanted to stick my head in it. I did have some issues with customs, so my turnaround time was a little bit limited. But yes, we, you know, our approach is usually that we moisture content and density to see what our approach will be with this coffee, and then also looking at the size of the bean to see what kind of I don't know, just to see what to expect, and sometimes using tried and true profiles that we already have, depending on like the origin, as a backdrop to kind of help guide what this profile wants to do. And so for me, when I was thinking about this coffee, I was like, do I think about origin or do I think about process? And I honestly I just kept going back and forth to like previous profiles of Brazils that we've had that had the same variety. And then I was going back to the information that I was getting from the QR code. And I was like, I was feeling a little like I don't know how to approach this because I only have such a small limited amount of coffee and I don't want to like go through so many profiles. And I ended up actually deciding to pay attention to the process more than the origin, knowing that the origin was going to show up it was going to tell me what I needed to do as I was roasting. So I approached it with an 18-pound batch, knowing that I can at least get 3 roasts out of it, or maybe even 4 with the amount that was provided. And enough so that I could send some to you, Marcus, and leave some here to like, you know, dial in that recipe for espresso. And I roasted it 3 times and I was really happy with the first one. And thinking about
profile in just a minute. So that's very cool.
yeah, I don't know if I'm saying too much and if I should wait until we get to the profile for more
Yeah,
information.
let's dive into the roasting when we have a profile ahead of us. I'm just thinking of our viewers, and they'll want to probably follow along with that profile as we get into batch sizes and heat application and things.
Yeah, but yeah, first impressions, very similar to Marta. Like I felt like it was such a clean coffee. I noticed the size of the bean. I actually have some with me. I don't know. You probably can't see it.
Oh,
And yeah, I think those were the first two things that I was looking at, and then just kind of looking at the information that was provided by Cropster and Marco's.
Yeah, so that slick QR code where you could just scan it and get all the sample information directly into your account, which is
yeah,
a lifesaver for me.
it really is. Yeah.
Great. And Flavio, last but certainly not least, how about you?
Yeah, sure.
What's arrived in your
Sure.
hand?
Sure. Usually my approach, I would say, is same like Aurelie said before, but specifically for this coffee. So when the coffee arrived, I opened the bag, so I had the first visual impression of it, and I was really impressed because coffee was very good sorted, very well sorted. So I started with the green grading, almost no defects, really very clean. And then I started measure just the density of the beans. And I also did just one sample roast with an Ikawa roaster, so 50 grams, no, 45 grams to be precise. Yeah, just cupping, and so to have a first impression of the coffees. And I was very surprised because the coffee was very clean already. And yeah, I could see the potential already during the first cupping. And so I had a very good idea also on how to roast the coffee after. So for me, it was pretty easy to roast this coffee. Maybe because I had enough experience with Brazilian coffees, but as I said before, just looking at the green coffee and having done the first sample roast and the first cupping, it was so easy for me to understand how this coffee reacts. Yeah, that's it. So I had a lot of fun, I would say.
Cool. Do any of you
As
remember?
Marcus, may I ask some questions? Because as a Brazilian, I'm curious about it. You both said that you have a approach by the origin, but Aurelie, she decided to choose the process approach. And how was it for you? Was this coffee very different to roast than the other Brazilians, or not? Or it was quite the same?
So it's the question for me?
For you both of you.
Oh, okay. So me personally, I started with origin in mind. But as I said before, looking at the green coffee, for me was pretty easy to understand that the coffee was very well dried also. It was really clean, and that maybe could react like an anaerobic coffee. So they tend, for me at least, to react in a kind of different ways at the end in the roaster. So it's a bit difficult to explain for me in English, but usually what I see with regular pulped natural or regular natural coffee from Brazil, they are not so dense, so you have to be careful roasting it. But with this coffee, I had the first impression that I could maybe push a bit more, let's say like this, during the roasting process. And this was also the result at the end. I mean, I can show you after the roast profile. So I was aware that the coffee will react a little bit different than the other Brazilian coffees at the end. Yes. So
I'm just gonna pull up your profile right now, Flavio.
Oh, okay.
We actually, like, this is fine. We can skip around this presentation. We
Oh,
might
okay.
as well jump into it because Martha, your question's great.
Okay. Cool. So should I start explain a bit more about the roast?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Just a little bit, some of the basic
Mhm.
things, right? Your batch size,
Yeah.
we sort of see your roast time just a little more than 11 minutes.
Okay,
Yeah, like
so
what you mean by pushing it and how it performed at the
yeah,
end.
sure. So as I said before, I roasted this coffee in a Probat 12 kilo, but I usually roast 8 kilo. So my batch size is 8 kilo. Why? Because I tried in the past, during the first months, with 12 kilo, with 10 kilos, with 5 kilo, and I found that 8 kilo is the perfect batch size for my machine. I know that every machine is a bit different. So with 8 kilo, as you can see from the roast profile, actually the reference, so the profile I chose at the end was the reference. So what you see in the background.
Okay.
But don't worry. As you can see, I started with a charge temperature of around 210 degrees Celsius. So for me, this is just a bit lower than usual. So for other coffees, I usually start a bit higher, so 220, 10 degrees Celsius more. Just because this was a Brazilian coffee, a bit softer than, let's say, a Peruvian one or a Colombian one. So just slightly lower start temperature, but I will say I started during the first 3 minutes with enough gas, 70% gas, because my idea was to push a bit harder at the beginning in order to develop more acidity in the coffee, because my goal was to develop a light espresso roast. So I wanted to preserve the fruitiness of this coffee. So focusing more on the fruity side than the nutty and chocolatey side. And doing like this at the beginning, so pushing a bit harder at the beginning, usually I get more acidity in the cup at the end. Then I stayed in the middle, I will say pretty stable, still around 70% gas, and until 7 minutes. I don't know if you can see it. So 70% gas till 7 minutes, and then I started lowering slowly. But I focus also to the end temperature. So the end temperature was almost the same as the start temperature, so 210 degrees, because I said before my goal was to achieve a light roast and for espresso. So and I usually end my roast for espresso at around 210 to 7 degrees. And I was also looking to develop the coffee enough, but not too much. What I mean with this, usually for an espresso roast, it depends, of course, from the coffee, but I'm always around 1 minute to 1 minute and 30 seconds, usually after first crack. And for this coffee, as I said before, because I wanted to preserve the fruitiness of it, and don't get too much roasty flavors at the end in the background, I decided to go for a slightly shorter development after first crack, so just 1 minute. And I think it works pretty good. Actually, I did 3 roasts of this coffee, so 3 times 80 kilos. But the one I chose at the end, also for the exhibition in Milan, was the first one. So the reference that you can see in the background. Yeah. So 30 minutes, 210 degrees Celsius end temperature, pretty stable with gas. And you can't see here, but I started with the lower airflow and ending with a higher airflow at the end.
And, looking at the reference profile, some things that jump out to me that I'm just curious about is, it is, I mean, as you said, it's a short development time, as a percentage, right? It was just a little less than 8%.
Yes.
But then also a very long drying time. And is that something that you typically see with the coffees that you roast, or was this something a little different that when you took this coffee and approached it?
This is how I usually roast all coffees at the beginning. So I like to extend a bit. I mean, I like to stay around 5 to 6 minutes for the drying phase. So at the beginning, especially with this kind of coffee, because I think this coffee needed really to dry, let's say slowly, so not too fast. I was thinking already from the beginning, a too fast roast, it's not good for this coffee. So let's take it easy.
The lower density that you mentioned, right? I think I measured the density.
Yeah, because as you can see, I pushed really, I will say, hard enough at the beginning, but then we have a steady rate of rise during, I will say, the last 2/3 of the roast.
Yep.
So it's very steady. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you. Aurelie, let's hear about your approach, which is cool because it actually, you know, if you look at like the development phases, you had a much shorter drying phase, a longer development time, kind of a similar overall roast time. But just to talk about your approach, I like that it's different, and I know that Martha was curious specifically about how you approached it.
And shorter, I feel like a very similar process happened to me of what Flavio is just explaining in terms of thinking about this. Initially I was like, acidity, we need to like get those fruit flavors to pop. And so I also went with the approach of wanting to push it a little bit in the beginning. So again, I'm roasting on a 15 kilo and I was doing an 18-pound batch. And so I used 100% gas after, well, maybe like at 104 or so is when I pushed the gas. And one thing that I've noticed with our roaster and its communication to Cropster is that 104 to me on the roaster is like 10 seconds delayed on Cropster.
We'll have to fix that, Aurelie. We'll get you in touch.
It's so ingrained in how we do everything now. So it's like, maybe it's, and we use it via Wi-Fi. So it's possible that once we connect it to the Ethernet, it's a different story, but.
That would absolutely be a different story, I think.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen that with the Lauren, but I will
It's
start.
in our process already. It's ingrained in how we do it, but yeah, you know, that initial soak is more of just kind of using the heat that's already in the roaster. And again, like I approached this with actually a Colombian coffee that was also anaerobic. And so I just wanted to test that and see like what it would do with that profile. And what it ended up showing me was that it wanted to linger in that drying phase a little bit longer than the Colombian coffee. And so I let it do its thing. I let it kind of guide me. And that's the beautiful thing about like having a coffee that you haven't been able to sample, you know, and you only know the information that you're getting from Cropster. And I knew based off of the smell, like I'm also like I'm always constantly smelling throughout each process. And I'm smelling the different fruits that are coming out, or like, you know, I was smelling a lot of like fruits in the Maillard, and specifically once development started to happen. And that's kind of where I ended this roast at 418 Fahrenheit, which, let me see if I can do the math here, what that is in Celsius. Let's see. 214 Celsius. And that's based off of both the knowledge of what I have been dropping a lot of our other Brazil coffees at. And I think initially I was very similar to Flavio's approach in terms of wanting to get to Maillard a little bit quicker, or at least within 430. But I was kind of happy with you know, the drying phase being where it was at, understanding that this coffee just needed a little bit more time to get to that point. And then the only thing that once we got to color change, I started, obviously dropping the temperature. And then just watching it, just closely watching to see what it was going to do. And very similar to Flavio, like the rate of rise just was very steady. And then once we got to first crack, I was just like paying close attention to the aromatics. And I was ready to drop it if I needed to before 418, but it just kept like blossoming in these really beautiful notes. And so I just let it ride out. And then I took that home over the weekend and we cupped it and we tried it as a pour over and using different brew ratios. And I really loved it. And I was like, maybe I'll try a different approach to it. I was going to try like less development to see if I could get more of the like fruit to pop. But honestly, like this one was my favorite one. The thing that I loved about it the most was just how everyone has been describing this coffee is that it's very smooth. It's very, I feel like there's like some caramel and like more like honey. It's a very honeyed coffee for me, while still getting those like, I think that's always been our approach at Little Waves is to like bring sweetness out, think about body based off of like what the coffee wants it to have. And bring as much body as we can without sacrificing the beautiful like fruity notes that can come out of it. And that was kind of my approach with all of this was how can we get some body that can kind of be the foundation for these beautiful like fruits, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, success because it was delicious. Both of your roasts were. And Martha, so we're going to throw it back to you. And here is your profile. Just a few comments about what drove your approach and how you think it turned out from your end. And of course, for the folks watching, as we talk about temperatures and things, it's all relative because we have 3 different roasting systems. So we can't quite compare on this. But yeah, Martha, I'd love to hear more about how you came to this approach, which looks pretty similar to Flavio's.
Yes, it does. Well, I asked you about the approach, the origin approach and the process approach, because, for me, all the coffees that I'm going to roast, they're going to be in comparison to Minamihara's coffee, since 90% of the coffees that I roast is from our farm. So I started checking the density of the coffee, because our coffees from our farms over here, they don't have such a big density, but it works like it's more dense. It's bizarre because it was like slightly less dense than our coffees. Marco's coffee was slightly less dense than our coffees, but it worked completely different in the roaster. So the first roast that I made was exactly like I was roasting a Minamihara coffee, but the coffee just ran inside the roaster. It finished in less than 6 minutes. It was like, wow, wanna drink me, I'm ready. And the funny thing is that I made some roasts here in the Provatino, 1.2 kilos roaster, and some in the Probat, the 5 kilo Probat that I also had. I'm more used to play with this small one. So most of the roasters I made here. And even though the coffee ran inside the roaster, no roast was bad, This one, the 6 minutes roast was just, a little bit too acidic, a little bit too with a high tartaric acid, but it was so fruity, so funky that it was good as well. You could fix it in the extraction, But I tried roast by roast to make it a little bit longer. And for me, the drying phase, I decided to make it longer because I don't know for you guys over there, but for me, it was almost 13%, the moisture percent. So
yes.
I like, yeah. So for me, it was important to make it a little bit longer. And just as Flavio, I usually use 1 minute development time. 10% of the coffees that I roast goes to 1.5 minutes, but these coffees asked for almost a minute in the development phase. And the difference between the roasts for me come from yellow fruits flavors to mix yellow and red fruits. And in this one was very nice. I could, just make the tartaric acid a little bit smoother. And there is this milk chocolate and cocoa flavors in the end, So for me, this one was the best. But none of the roasts, even those, the final temperature for me went from 186 degrees Celsius to 191. This is the higher final temperature. And in all of them, the results were good and extremely fruity and funky.
And your roast, Martha, was overall super short. It was just below 8 minutes compared to some like 10.5, 11-minute roasts.
I think that this has to with the size of the batch, it was 1.2 kilos. And yeah. I normally go from 7 to 8 minutes in a batch like this size.
Great.
So for me, it wasn't, that short. When I'm making a sample, I roast all my samples here in the 1.2 kilos probet as well. And yeah. I go in the sample roast, I go to 7 minutes. And in 1.2 kilos, I go from 7 to 8, not more than this.
Great. Wow, very good. This is fascinating. I'm just curious, some general comments from all of you. This is a very unique coffee, not a coffee we see every day. So for folks that are watching, what would be some advice that you would give when you have a unique coffee that you're handed? Aurelie,
should I start? Okay.
Go for it.
I mean, my experience roasting coffee is not so long like other roasters out there, but from my experience, what I saw also with this coffee, so not only with this coffee, what I learned with time is that especially with Brazilian coffee, like natural Brazilian coffee or anaerobic, usually it's best to end the roast with not too much energy and a lot of airflow. From my experience, this way you can really reduce the roastiness at the end. You can go also for a medium roast like the one from Aurelie. I tested your coffee, it was really, really good. So mine, for example, was roasted a bit lighter, but I think using this approach for Brazilian coffee, especially for coffee like this one, it helps a lot. So this is why also, as you saw in my roast profile, I tend to really go down with the energy at the end, but going up with the airflow. Yeah, I think it helps a lot with this kind of coffee to bring fruitiness out and avoid roastiness at the end.
And on your roasting machine, when you're at the end of the roast and the gas is somewhat low, as you increase airflow, does that airflow increase also reduce the roasting machine?
Yeah. Yes, definitely, yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Good advice. I love that. Aurelie, how about you? What can somebody take away here and try on their own?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway for me was just don't be intimidated by the process, the processing, especially with some of these like newer techniques, like with anaerobic or low oxygen. I feel like we tend to feel like we're walking into new territory, and as roasters, you have the tools to make it happen. I think we learned so much from, or I personally learned so much from this coffee because I when we are pulling espresso, we call it at Cocoa Cinnamon, we call it the Socratic barista approach, where you allow the coffee to kind of tell you what it needs. And I think using your knowledge of what you know of how to, create a profile or run even just one batch is a lot of information there to really get to know the coffee. And I feel like very similar to Flavio's suggestion, I think in my experience, both origin and process played a role in this coffee. And I think it was just, I don't know, I think have a lot of fun with it. Don't get too stressed out by thinking that you're going to mess it up. I think that's my biggest advice in terms of unique coffees. Obviously, I think maybe doing sample roasts to start off with, especially if you only have, a 15 kilo and an Ikawa. You don't want to do a lot of 18-pound batches and throw away a lot of coffee. But very similar to what Martha was saying, like even all of those approaches were tasty, and you can even, I feel like even marketing that in a way, like having a different approach to a coffee. We were talking about this at our prelim conversation about this webinar, is like having this coffee as a box set of light, medium, and maybe even dark roast, or even just these 3 different profiles that we created for this coffee and what its iterations can be. I mean, I'm drinking all 3 of them right now, side by side. And exactly what you said, Martha, I'm also tasting like yellow peach fruits, in the first one that you took with you, Marcus. And then on the third one, I was happy with the first and third one. The second one to me felt a little flat. And I feel like the third one is giving me more blackberry than I'm getting like yellow fruits. So I don't know. I think that there's a lot of, what's the word? I guess it's
Range.
Yes, thank you. Range. I feel like unique coffees have a lot of range in how you can present them. And so I think take it easy on yourself.
No, I love that. I mean, I love like you're sort of balancing this like pragmatic like business owner approach, right? Of you don't have all day or all the coffee in the world to try multiple samples and find the perfect sweet spot, but there probably is no perfect sweet spot. Perfect runs a gamut. So don't be afraid to just present what you create if you like it. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, the coffee itself will present itself, on like as soon as you start the roast, it will tell you what it needs. So I think paying attention to that is also important.
Yeah, beautiful. And Martha, how about you? What would your advice be for a roaster maybe a little confused about some new coffees or not sure where to start?
Yeah, as a Brazilian, I need to say, let Brazilian coffee surprise you guys. I loved when Aurelie said that she chose to go for the process approach, whether go to the origin approach, because, we Brazilian producers, we are making so many experiments, and loads of producers, just like Marcus, they are making these experiments, but they are collecting data over it, and they are learning with it, and they are making, they are able to repeat the results. So this is very important. So it's like a serious job, a serious work with coffee. So for me, the advice is something like this, it's just like, there's no Brazilian coffee, there's loads Brazilian coffee. We are like a continental country, so many regions in here. For me, to roast Marcus coffee was just like to roast a completely different coffee from Minamihara. We are not so far away, right, Marcus? We are quite close from one another, but the coffees, the density were different, and the way to roast was very different as well. So it's like it's more like I'm asking you guys to don't underestimate Brazilian coffees and let them surprise yourselves.
Perfect.
I guess it was a great surprise, wasn't it, guys?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with a number of Brazilian producers and large exporters over the years to taste these range of experiments and trials. And I love that we're sort of moving past the time when you can just name a country and have an expectation of profile. And I think Brazil is really driving that. So really cool. And yeah, Marcos, thank you for being part of it. And we're just past the top of the hour now. So we've had a good session. If anybody that's watching has any questions, they're welcome to ask. Of course, anybody who's viewing either live now or the recording, if you want to get in touch and learn more about Cropster and what it can do for your business, you can scan the QR code or just go to cropster.com and there's an option to book a demo and start a free trial as well. And that goes for Cropster Origin. It goes for Cropster Roast, which we've been talking about as well. And also our newest product, Cropster Kaffe, which all of these coffees were brewed at World of Coffee using Cropster Kaffe. And I'm sure that the Kaffe team is going to tell me, why didn't we have Kaffe brewing recipes loaded in this presentation? But check it out and give us a shout. Do you all have any other questions for one another or just parting thoughts as we say goodbye?
Yeah, how can I get some of y'all's coffee, of this coffee in my hands? Coffee
Marcos,
swap.
ela quer mais café. Marcos, como é que ela faz para comprar mais café de ti?
You're muted,
O
Marcos.
áudio, Marcos.
Sorry. Contact me directly in my inbox. This is possible. This year we don't have much coffee in the cave because the harvest we broke in the, everybody knows that it's left because of frozen. But I'm very happy for living this coffee for everybody. Thank you so much, Aurelie. Thank you, Flavio. Thank you, Marta.
You're welcome.
Marta,
Thank you.
Yes, Marta is my idol in Brazil. I like much the job, the roasting coffee. Very special person.
Thank you. Aurelie, Flavio, we need to set up a visit here. You need to come and visit us. You need to keep in touch, and I take you to Marcos' farm, and then you come visit Minamihara farm, and I'm sure I'm going to introduce you guys to amazing coffees over here.
Minamihara coffee is on the best organic coffee in the world, in my opinion.
I agree.
I have actually sourced coffee from there from LA.
Ah, really? So we need to talk more.
That's great. Now we're all connected, so I love it. We all have each other's email addresses from organizing. And of course, if anybody that's watching wants to learn more about these specific coffees or needs contact info for Marcos or for Minamihara and Martha, even if you want to buy coffee from Little Waves or Stoll, they have online websites. I'm happy to direct you to the right place. And I just want to say thanks to all of you for participating. This is so fun. We'll do more in the future.
Yeah,
Marcos, and I want to thank you a lot, not only for this webinar. It was amazing to be here with exchanging and learning with all of you guys, but I want to thank Cropster. Just like Marcos said, it's amazing to have a software that can collect all the data, and since we are organic, to work with all the traceability from seed to roast, it's amazing to have a software that you can trust and that helps you to make a better work. So thank you very much, our Cropster team.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for giving me access to your Cropster accounts, because it's always interesting for me to see how folks are using it by kind of being in there as a user of your company for a short time. So thank you for that. And we'll have future projects. I'm working on a little research project for actually like a Swiss Food Institute and the Swiss University on like drying times and solubility, which looking at all of our drying times and having this discussion makes me think perhaps I found some other collaborators in that project. In this room.
Super cool.
So we'll stay in touch. But thank you, everybody. Thanks to everybody who attended.
Marcos.
And we'll
Thank
be in
you.
touch.
See you.
Alrighty, bye.